I just felt like fear within our house. Like I could hear the arguments like all the time, and I vividly remember him like overturning the couch chairs in the living room and just screaming and yelling and throwing things.
In Manchester only, I've been moved more than 7 times. I'm still looking for a home where I can feel much safer and where I will not be moving again and again and again.
We had a victim of domestic abuse who had been abused financially for 30 years, had never seen access to their finances, and as a result, a lot of rent arrears built up and they were evicted.
One day last week, in a team meeting, received a call from a woman who had been locked in her home by her parents because she refused to be married. She refused to go into she was being forced into marriage.
His family were in the police force over in Pakistan, and he was making threats to the victim that he was going to do away with her family in Pakistan.
She's now also dealing with the abuse from the community. So she's been called all sorts of names, she's been ostracised.
You can feel when people start to get angry, and it really scares me.
Those fears and concerns that you have, and the way that your circumstances put you in a situation that you are completely relying on those people, they can exploit you.
They're currently living in a property with their perpetrator, which again has control over the finances, and it's really difficult for this victim to move on.
She's not only had to deal with the concept of being homeless, had to deal with all of this trauma that she experienced in her marriage, but then with these communities, you also have the stigma that comes with it as well. So you have that to deal with as well.
At that time, I was thinking this is the worst that can happen to somebody, but the things turn out to be so much bad afterwards.
She said something that will sit with me forever, and there's always a spare half of a bed.
The Domestic Abuse Act received royal assent in April this year and is now enshrined in law. And within that act, there is a local authority duty, a duty on all Tier 1 local authorities to provide accommodation-based services.
Domestic abuse can happen between any family member, whether it's mother, son, brother, sister, ex-partners, current partners, anybody that has been in an intimate relationship together with some form of sexual aspect to it. Doesn't matter whether gender, ethnicity, the sexuality, doesn't matter at all, and also if they're 16 years or above.
I think for every person it's very different, their experience is very different. So a lot of people think domestic abuse is just violence, and it isn't. It can be honour-based, it can be controlling behaviour, it can be financial abuse, there's all different aspects. There's a lot of victims that we're coming across at the moment that have got no recourse to public funds in the UK. They're here on spousal visas. So they have no rights. They're being threatened with, by their other half. I'll have you deported, I'll remove you from the country, I'm keeping the children, and there's all things like that.
So the reason why we've brought these specific partners around the table is because we will not be able to deal with domestic abuse in isolation. It is a multi-agency commitment and investment to ensure that we've got prevention, we've got early intervention, which has representation from housing, police, local authority, VCSE, charity sector. And this can be from children and young people, within education or within youth groups, all the way up to adulthood, and focusing on ensuring victims or potential victims have the knowledge of what is a healthy relationship, what signs should you look out for around domestic abuse, and what do you do if you are a victim of domestic abuse. And that's one of the main reasons why we're here today.
We provide shared housing models, small shared housing models that operate with a life skills programme attached to it. And the idea of the life skills programme is to end the cycle of violence.
It takes, on average, 9 times for an individual to leave a relationship that's abusive. When they do go to support, there's a significant number, we'll talk about 40% of women that we've had access to when they go to services from the statutory point of view to ask for assistance. They often don't highlight and disclose that they've been in abuse for fear of reprisals from family, for fear of not being believed. They have repeat attempts to leave, but don't become successful.
If the victim decides that they're going to stay in their property until they get rehoused rather than going straight into refuge, having those measures in place, it makes them feel a bit safer in their property, and they want to stay where they are, so they want to feel safe at home.
Irwell Valley in the last year have introduced 2 new specialist teams within our housing management system. So there's the tenancy sustainment team, and we have 4 coaches who work across Greater Manchester, including Trafford, and we also now have a community safety team who work with victims of domestic abuse, as well as managing some very complex antisocial behaviour cases.
We would always try and support one of our customers to stay in their own home if that's possible, and we would do that by helping to make sure that the property is more secure, making sure the relevant orders in place, making referrals to the relevant agencies that can work with the customer to keep them as safe as possible. We will work with our customers, we will give them rehousing advice, we'll make referrals into housing options, and provide the relevant references, etc., for them to be able to move out.
Trafford Domestic Abuse Services, TDAS, it's a charity that's been set up, and we work with women and men and children that have been affected by domestic abuse. So we offer refuge accommodation, we offer outreach services, so if people want to ring in or want a face-to-face appointment, any method to communicate with those individuals, we're really creative around that, whether it's emails, text messages. We've also got a children and young people service, so that's Trafford and Salford. So we recognise that children will not only experience domestic abuse, but they'll also have witnessed domestic abuse. So where adults have got support, children rightly need support in their ways as well. And then we've also got our IDVA, which is the Independent Domestic Violence Advocate Service. So they work with high-risk cases of domestic abuse.
We're able to do their paperwork for them, translate that for them. We can attend appointments with them.
Within Trafford, we've recently completed our joint strategic needs assessment, but we also done victim and survivor surveys. So we actually spoke to victims themselves, gathered their authentic voice, really found out what is the need for these victims. And we also done a professional survey as well to find out what professionals think are the issues. What we found is that within Trafford, we've got 11,060 residents who are experiencing domestic abuse, and around 1 in 10 children and young people. And what we also found from that strategic needs assessment, if we're looking at housing specifically, is that 4% of homeless applicants are because of domestic abuse. And this is a total of around 135 victims within Trafford every year. What COVID-19 did for victims of domestic abuse is put them in unsafe homes, forced to live within that abuse, experiencing that abuse more readily. And what we saw within Trafford and nationally is the complexities increase.
Jobs have disappeared, people have been drinking more, cooped up in a house, nowhere to go. Mental health has declined, so that's had a huge impact as well on domestic abuse.
Normally that person would be out and about, going to the pub or going to the shops, and if they're seen with physical signs of abuse, somebody pick up on it sooner. So just a lot of it's been behind closed doors. during COVID.
COVID-19 has had a horrendous impact, and it's massively increased the levels of domestic abuse cases that have been reported to us.
We're seeing this increase in demand. We're seeing victims of domestic abuse within Trafford with that housing need, but again, that low stock, that lack of consistent stock. I think it's also really important to say that when we're talking about homelessness, we're not just talking about victims who are sleeping rough on the street, but we're also talking about victims who are having to sofa surf or live in temporary accommodations such as hostels or B&Bs or with family and friends, which isn't their property. They don't necessarily feel safe. And we also know that 62% of single homelessness people are hidden homeless, meaning they're not known to services, and therefore they'll never be known to data. So when we're talking about data, we really need to be aware of the fact it is a minimum. There are a lot more victims of domestic abuse within Trafford who are facing a housing need or homelessness that we're not aware of.
Didn't know anyone, nobody who can help me or anything, so I was completely relying on the women organizations who were supporting me at that time.
My mum and dad's marriage just kind of like broke down, but we had nowhere to live when we came back to England, so TDAS were the ones to help us live in a women's refuge, but because it was me, my mum and my two siblings, we all had a room and it was bunk beds, so it was all like a dormitory essentially.
He's not even a human the way that I saw him in that house. I ended up into an A&E hospital and I was pregnant 3 weeks. And from my head till my feet, there was no part of my body which was not bitten, bruised, or cut. At that time, I thought, this is the end of my life.
I don't know if financially abusive is the right word, but you'd have to beg him to get new things. And, you know, once you've outgrown clothes, you just dealt with it. She had to sell, like, her jewellery that she got from her mum, who's now passed away, and her wedding ring, and she had to work full-time. But that money, he would then ask for it. As a father, you'd think you would prioritise your family. One of the reasons why it was so hard for her to leave and why she went back the first place is because she didn't have any money. Money's a huge factor.
Literally nobody really cares what's happening to you or how you're going to survive. You're going to live or not. Tomorrow if something happens, you are in so much fearful situation.
People don't realise just how hard it is to leave an abusive marriage or relationship when your entire being is tied to that person through a marriage visa or through financially they support you, or through language. When you can't speak the language of this country, when you don't have any right to be here without being married to that person, it's no wonder people don't leave.
You don't know how you're going to spend your night. You are standing on the road with all your luggage. No organization is accepting you. So TDAS, when they accepted me, they gave me their refuge. I was so grateful to them.
The women's refuge was just like, you know, that first kind of step into the journey of liberation and independence.
I just want to tell you that the girl who is sitting in front of you now is not the girl that came here in UK 4 years ago. I'm so grateful for people who believe you in a very tough situation and who give you one chance because they don't know. It's maybe another call for them, but it was the only call for me.
Irwell Valley, particularly in Trafford, have recognised that there are a number of barriers to victims accessing affordable and safe accommodation. So we are building one of the largest affordable housing developments in Sale West at the moment. It's a challenge that we're working in collaboration with the local authority and across with our partnerships in GM to try and ensure that there's more affordable housing.
There is help out there. You know, please contact one of the services. That there is support there. And also, as a victim of domestic abuse, it doesn't matter that you've got a tenancy somewhere. You are homeless from home. You know, you can approach any council of your choice within within the United Kingdom and seek that help.
On a day-to-day basis, we're liaising directly with housing, we're liaising with Trafford Council, food banks, we're liaising with children's services, adult social services. So without these other agencies, without the voluntary sector, without the statutory bodies, we would not be able to meet the needs of the ladies in refuge.
We need to see the whole picture. We need to understand every victim's experience of domestic abuse in housing. We need to remember that anyone and everyone can be a victim of domestic abuse. And success for me is that we never turn away a victim of domestic abuse, that we're able to offer support that is tailored to those people's needs in a holistic way to anyone who comes through our doors, and ensuring that we've got commissioning embedded within that.